Good day. This is the Devar Torah on Parshat Emor, which is the Devar Torah for this week in Israel. In Chutz La'aretz, it's the previous one, Parshat Kadoshim, which I sent out a Devar Torah on last week. This Parshat Emor is an interesting parsha covering a lot of different areas. And we're also in a very intense time of the year on the Jewish calendar. First of all, we have now started the month of Iyar, which in many ways is a positive month because it's a month of healing. And however, also this time of year is in a period of Sfiras Omer, counting of the Omer, which starts on the second day of Pesach and continues to the day before Shavuos, the next Chag. And this Yontif, this time period, is also known as a sad period, a period of judgment. We see this in the famous story. In fact, there's different opinions, but basically from Rosh Chodesh Iyar at the latest until Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of counting of the Omer. It's considered a period of semi-mourning because this was the time the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died, which I'll have more to say shortly. And also it is a time where there has been numerous tragedies to the Jewish people, which we've seen. One of the period was the period of the Crusades, where literally hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed in the Crusades. And also there's been a tragedy since then. The latest one, unfortunately, being the incident that happened, died yesterday night. And I'd like to first of all review the Parsha. So review, and then I would like to focus on Sfiras Omer. This Devar Torah is going to be the part of the continuing series as we go through the 49 days. We're now on day 20, in which I'm going to be discussing various different aspects of Sfiras Omer, the counting of the Omer, and its historical and spiritual impact. I'll be discussing that next week in Parshat Bahar, which also deals with the interesting concept of the Yovel and Shemitah, that one has seven years, the seventh year of each cycle. The land is allowed to lie at rest. We're in that currently in Eretz Israel now. It also, after 7 times 7, which is the Chumash tells us 49 years, is the 50th year of Yovel, the Jubilee. And again, we see this repeating pattern of 49 followed by the significance of the 50th, just like the 49 days of Sfiras Omer. And the 50th day being Shavuos, and 2 weeks from now in Parshat B'Kusai, which mainly deals with the blessings that the people will get if they follow the Torah, and the curses that will be inflicted on them if they don't. Again, we see a period of judgment. And now, looking at this week's Parsha, it begins with discussing which Kohanim, the priestly families, Kohanim, are allowed to offer sacrifices and which aren't, and also the women that Kohanim are allowed to marry. And the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is allowed to marry, categories of women. It then goes on to other laws of purity and impurity, and that nobody can either deal with the korbanot, the sacrifices, or offer them, who's in an impure state with serious consequences if they do. The Parshat then goes on to discuss the various Yom Tovim. It doesn't list the Korban out here, which will be in the later Parsha, but what it does deal is to lay out the different Hagim Yom Tovim. And it continues with discussion of how we must offer Korbans, we must be pure. It then deals with the Jewish man who is blaspheming Hashem, his name, which is unfortunate, as we're supposed to be a pure nation, getting closer to Hashem. His blasphemy, of course, goes totally against that. The important principle of how one deals with entering a fellow individual or an individual, a neighbor's animal, where we talk about an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth, etc. Very famous and often misquoted verse. And then continues with the discussion of his punishment, where he is executed. And then after the execution, talks about this life for life and eye for an eye. And it finishes with the blasphemer, this concussion being stoned to death. Now, the mitzvah I'd like to emphasize, it's interesting, the structure of the discussing of the Yom Tovs. Normally, in some ways, we think of Rosh Hashanah being the head of the year, followed by Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and then we come eventually to Pesach and Shavuos. However, the order here in the Chumash is we start with Pesach, go to Parshat Emor, from there to Shavuos, and eventually to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Shmini Atzeret, which is Atzeret meaning gathering. It's the 8th day gathering. There is a additional meaning here, how they're connected, because as we're going to see in future Devar Torah, Shavuot is called the Atzeret of it's called the Atzeret of Pesach. In other words, the 8th day gathering. Interestingly enough, it takes 49 days, and the 50th day being Shavuos. Yet after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we have Sukkot for 7 days, and then the 8th day we immediately follow with the holiday of Shmini Atzeret. I'll be discussing a deeper level in future Devar Torah, but today I would like to point out the following, that this period of Parshat Emor, which is a period where we're supposed to work on ourselves and eliminate impurities within ourselves before we get to the holiday of Shavuot, it takes 49 days. Yet when we get to Sukkot, follows immediately. One of the reasons given for that is that there we had Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where to purify ourselves and we were being forgiven. As we do not have that same opportunity now, it takes 49 days of working on ourselves to achieve that, and only then do we merit the 50th day. The number 49 also indicating, because from the period of when we got out of Egypt, we had sunk to the 49th level of impurity in Egypt, one more level of impurity at the 50th, which is where the Egyptians were, we would have been lost. There would have been nothing left to redeem. This is why, even though originally we were supposed to stay in Mitzrayim for 400 years, and if we had done that, the Jewish people would not have had to go into the other exiles. However, because there was no possibility of that occurring, because the level we had sunk, the period of exile started with the birth of Yitzchak, 210 years before we actually got into Egypt. And now I would like to go to the mitzvah of Emor. And after talking about the Korbanot in Pasuk 15, in chapter 23, it says, talking about Pesach, Svaratem Lachem Machrechin HaShabbat B'Yom V'yechem Et Omer Tzednufa Sheva Shabbatot Tmim V'Einu Ad Amacharas HaShabbat HaShavit Briso Chamishim Yom V'Kata Mincha Chadash Hashem. It says you should count for yourself from the morrow of the rest day, which it sounds like Shabbat, but it's actually talking about the day of first day of Pesach, the day when you bring the Omer of the waving of barley. 7 weeks they shall complete. And until the morrow of the 7th week, you shall count 50 days and offer a meal offering to Hashem. Now, this mitzvah sounds fairly simple, yet you count 50 days. However, there is a lot more attached to it, because each one of those days we are supposed to be working on perfecting ourselves. Hashem, in fact, there are 10 qualities of Hashem with which he created the world. They're also referred to as Sferos. The first 3 are intellectual, Chachma, Bina, and Das, Da'at, Keter, Chachma, Bina. There's different listings of that. The next 7 are the emotional ones, starting with Chesed and ending with Malchus. We are supposed to, in mixed combinations, we are supposed to work on each one of those. There's 49 different combinations of the 7, which leads to the 49 days. We're supposed to be working on those qualities. If it does so, we'll be enacting what the Jewish people did coming out of Mitzrayim, going to one new level of purity each day till they reach the level where they could see the Torah and what the highest level a human being could obtain. It also reflects the 49 levels of knowledge. 50th level is Hashem's. Moshe was conversing with the first 49 levels of wisdom. Now, the thing I would like to discuss today is it's also linked to the famous story of Rabbi Akiva and his Talmidim. Rabbi Akiva, who started learning Torah at the age of 40, over the next 20 years, developed 24,000 students who eventually all died in a plague, divine plague. Now, according to different opinions, the plague started in the beginning as counting of the Omer, and ended on the 33rd day, Lamed Gimel, Lag BaOmer, which I'll be speaking about more next week. And according to others, at least there was a respite with that day where no more students of Rabbi Akiva were killed. Ultimately, they were replaced by the 5 Talmidim from the south, as they were known. Now the question is, why did 24,000 righteous, apparently righteous, pure Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva die like that? Now, on one level, it's saying that the Talmidim did not respect each other. There were 24,000 students, 12,000 study partner teams, 2 people each. And even though they were brilliant, they did not respect each other and their learning, and therefore had to be destroyed on one level. Why? Because if they hadn't been destroyed, what would have happened is that the future generations of Jewish people descending from them would have had, putting it in, I guess, genetic terms, a recessive negative gene. If reproduced enough time, will make the recessive gene a dominant gene and can lead to all kinds of genetic diseases and what have you. Here we're saying if they had grown, been allowed to continue, their descendants would have become dominant, and there would have been so much dispute and machloket that it would have eventually torn the Jewish people apart. Now that's on one level. If one looks on a deeper level, and as pointed out by the Arizal, there was something deeper going on here. Souls have different shorishes, roots. One of them is that of some chesed, some gevura. Now gevura means strict din, adhering to the law, taking the strictest interpretation. And that was who Rabbi Akiva represented. Now, his students were supposed to also follow in that path of Gevura, strict judgment, strict chin, keeping absolutely everything properly. And that was reflective of Hashem's name, Elohim. Now, Elohim was the name with which Hashem did the 7 days of creation. And what happened was, instead of the strict din, what happened was, if the word strict din, if they had adhered to that properly and had been behaving properly, the 24,000 students applying such standards could have enhanced each other. Instead, what happened instead of an enhancement was the direct opposite of an enhancement. What happened, in fact, is they took the 24 purities. The name Elohim has 24 different aspects, qualities of God, that they were qualities that they were supposed to try to emulate. And if they had, it all would have been good. Instead, they took those strict qualities to turn on one another. As is described, they killed each other and hated each other. Now, it wasn't a literal physical killing, but it was an emotional disconnection, spiritual disconnection. And because of that, the 24,000 students were killed. which would have left with no further transmission of the Torah. So instead, what happened was 5 new Talmidim were created, and they were known as the Talmidim of the South. Now, that was not Gevurah. These students suffered from Gevurah Katan, the lower Gevurah, lower strictness, and they totally misused it and misinterpreted it. The second 5 students, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer ben Shmuel, Shimon, Rabbi Nehemiah, they succeeded because what did they do? They took those same qualities, they were at a higher level, used them in a higher da'at, higher level of wisdom, and were able to reach very high spiritual heights, because instead of using them for controversy and to attack each other, they used them to work together to elevate ideas and build together rather than destroying each other. And they represented what's called Gevurah Gedola, which is represented earlier in creation by the 5 Sophite letters. There are 5 letters, which when they're at the end of a Hebrew word, come in a different form. They represent the ultimately strict Gevurah. In one sense, they were useful because when Hashem created the universe with the 22 Hebrew letters, the universe was infinitely expanding, and Hashem used the 5 Sophite letters to stop the expansion so that things could properly be created, and there could be a universe in the sense that we understood it. And these 5 students represent that quality of using strict justice for the good and for building. And as we're going through Sfiras Omer, the counting of the Omer, may we all merit personal growth and striving for perfection. And it's not perfectionist, but perfection. There's no nearest we can get to it, so that when it comes to Shavuos, we'll truly deserve to reenact the receiving of the Torah. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.